Hey everyone, my name is Prince, and welcome back to another video talking about Arthur and the Minimoys. This is pretty much a part 2 to the video I was doing talking about the 10th moon, so if you're someone who's clicked on this video wanting to learn about Arthur, then go watch that video first, because that goes over a lot of context that I'm not really going to repeat in this video. And given that this is technically a part 2, I'm not going to bother with a lengthy intro, and we're just going to get straight into it. As always, if you haven't already, make sure to go join the casual Discord in the description down below, because that way you'll be automatically pinged whenever I upload or go live. And also make sure to go join the Seven Kingdoms Discord if you're a fan of Arthur and you want to hang out with other Arthur fans, or if you just want to know more about Arthur. So with that being said, let's get into the video. So in the previous video, I discussed the 10th moon, and how much we understand about how it actually works, which isn't a whole lot, to be honest. However, I made it very clear in that video that I was actually leaving something out. During the previous video, I talked about how the telescope is the main way that people travel from the human world to the Minimoy world. However, in the previous video, I did hint that it wasn't the only way, and that in the days before the telescope was invented, a far different method was used, one that was a lot more dangerous. I'm talking, of course, about the vines. Now, the vines, otherwise known as the creeper technique, I would put a Minecraft joke in here, but I would prefer this video remain a little bit serious, was something introduced in the second movie of the franchise, Arthur and the Revenge of Malthazar. And like most things in the franchise, it heralds from the original books. But weirdly enough, the vines is a rare example of the movies actually giving us more on something than the books. Now, unfortunately, unlike the two books that make up the events of the first movie, the third and fourth book that were adapted into the second and third movie never got an official English translation for some fucking reason. However, I do actually have someone translating these books for me personally in order to read them and tell you guys all of the differences and information in the books that aren't in the movies. But as I said, the Vines is a weird case where the movie actually goes a little bit more in depth as to what the vines actually are than the book does. And that's saying a lot, because the scene in the movie explaining what the vines are is incredibly brief, but in the books it is genuinely even briefer. So what are the vines? Well, the vines, also known as the creeper technique, and potentially known in the Metasalai language as Bongzilla Wompsiga, or simply Wompsiga, is the only other known method of transforming oneself from a human to a Minimoy. Within the book, it's simply described as being a method only used in emergencies, but in the movie, we get a little bit more. In Arthur and the Revenge of Malthazar, Arthur is about to use the light beam to connect to the telescope and travel to the Minimoy world once again. However, a cloud passes in front of the moon just as he activates the telescope, meaning that the light beam cannot connect to the telescope, and the 10th moon passes before the moon can be uncovered again, and thus the telescope deactivates. Arthur then turns to the Bogo Metasalai chief, asking if there's any other way to join the Minimoys. The chief mentions the vines, and Arthur is immediately on board, but Archibald explains that the vines is an incredibly dangerous method of passing through to the Minimoy world, and that it's the method that the ancestors of the Bogo Metasalai used before the telescope was invented. And he even goes on to say that it was so dangerous that a lot of the ancestors actually died using it. But Arthur, fearing that something may have happened to Selenia, will hear absolutely none of it and insists that he needs to use it. Now, once again, just like all the magic in the Arthur universe, we don't really know the exact specific specifications of how the vines actually work. However, I'd say we get a little bit more from the vines in terms of context than we do for most magical things in the Arthur universe, which makes a refreshing change. Now, the way the vines work differs a little bit in the book to the way it does in the movie. And once again, I think the way it works in the movie is actually better, because the way it works in the books, while pretty similar, is honestly a little bit weird. So we'll start off talking about the movie version. Now, funnily enough, the vines don't actually have anything to do with the 10th moon. The vines doesn't appear to need any connection to the 10th moon and can seemingly be done at any time. But obviously the telescope is preferable because the telescope method doesn't have any risk of injury or death. So how does the vines actually work? Well, compared to the telescope being more of a magical invention, the vines is honestly more of a magical ritual. It involves 5 people, not including the person getting transformed, going around the person and wrapping them up in rope or vines, hence the term the vines, as ropes are sort of similar to vines and it matches with the whole nature aesthetic that all of the Bogo Metasalai magic has. And also the reason that it's also called the creeper technique is because, for those of you who don't know, a creeper is another word for a vine. But the person in question is wrapped up in rope until they're basically completely encased apart from their head. Then a single drop of a magical potion, which was most likely one of Archibald's potions that can do many different things, including transforming a human to a Minimoy and vice versa, as well as a few that we never saw used, including human to animal and human to plant. And I really don't know why Archibald has those. I cannot see any circumstance where Archibald would want or need to use those. But regardless, a drop of a potion, we don't really know which one, but it's assumed that it was most likely a human to Minimoy one, because the human to Minimoy ones clearly don't work like simply, like you can't just drink it. So a single drop is dropped on the person's head, and then all of the people holding the ends of the ropes that the person is wrapped up in begin to pull, beginning to constrict the person within the ropes as magical energy begins to generate within the ropes. Now, it's stated that as soon as you begin this process, there's no going back, and you have to see it through no matter how painful it gets, so it really is all or nothing once you start. Now, the way it seemingly works is that the potion works in tandem with the ropes, basically crushing the person within them until the bundle of ropes is literally just a bundle of ropes and the person is basically vanished. However, the Metasalai chief states that while they're using the vines, they need to get all of the water out of Arthur's body, which is another one of those things in the Arthur universe that is just said, and we don't really know what is meant by it, so I don't really know what that means. Maybe as opposed to humans, Minimoys don't actually have water in their body, and it's substituted out with other fluids, which could be an explanation as to the membrane that you pass through when using the telescope to transform, as that could be leaching the water out of your body. And in fact, when Arthur leaves the Minimoy world in the first movie, going through the receptacle, there are a lot of like watery particles, so okay, maybe that is a theory, and maybe that's why the vines are so dangerous. Like, maybe they have to do it quickly, transforming them quick before the human body realizes that, oh shit, I don't have any water inside of me, I'm now going to die. Not to mention that getting crushed inside of a bunch of rope is probably pretty painful. In fact, I don't even have to say probably, because I've actually used the vines twice, and despite the fact that neither time I actually did it properly, I gotta tell ya, Neither time was fun. But anyway, once the human is completely crushed within the vines, the Metasalai shove a metal pole similar to the telescope into the ground and then tip up the bundle of vines that used to be a person, and a single drop of golden liquid pours out, which is actually the person, and then just like with passing through the telescope receptacle, they pass through the tube, land underground wherever the pole has been shoved into, and once the liquid fades away, they're left as a Minimoy. Now, the vines are described a little bit differently in the book. It seems to be the same general idea, and there's still a decent bit of consistency, with the chief describing having to get all of the water out of Arthur's body, or more so describing that as what the vines actually do. But in terms of the book version, the differences seem to come at the very end of the process, whereas instead of an ornate metal pole, which, by the way, as Arthur falls through, seems to have a bunch of internal mechanisms all moving about, so I don't know what that's all about, but instead of that, in the books, they literally just use a piece of bamboo, and it's also described that the bundle of rope that was Arthur is now no thinner than a wire, and they actually inserted it into the pole of bamboo. And I really don't see how it could shrink that much, because in the movie it looks believable that Arthur's been like disintegrated within the vines, but the ropes themselves are still there, so I really don't see them shrinking that much like a wire. A wire is like that thin. But it then gets even weirder, and I genuinely forgot how different it is. But the Metasalai chief then pulls out another potion and pours it into the bamboo, uttering a spell that can be roughly translated to, even the most beautiful flower will always need water, pouring the entire contents of the bottle into the bamboo, and then a pink substance flows down the vine. I'm not sure if that's the potion or something generated from the potion, and covers it with a thin layer of ice, resembling, and I shit you not, this is what it says, the frosting that a confectioner would decorate a donut with. So that's a slightly different series of events for the very end of the vines, but in the next chapter, Arthur plops out in the ball of liquid, and he emerges as a Minimoy, same as he does in the movie, so that part, at least, is relatively the same. Although, for those of you who don't know, he actually appears in Max's bedroom instead of the middle of the bar. And one other difference that I forgot to mention from book to movie is that in the movie, when the BOGO chief drops the droplet of liquid on Arthur's head, he says, "Nature belongs to you, you belong to nature," which I more so see as just a traditional thing you say when about to use the vines, or when about to carry out the vines, rather than any sort of spell. But in the book, it actually says that the chief was uttering spells in an unknown dialect, so in the book at least, he was actually using some sort of spell. Oh, and it also says that the light, like, surrounding the vines is actually flickering with thousands of colors, so it seems as though it was like rainbow light in the books instead of the yellow light that we see in the movies. Well, it's actually more of like an orangey, yellow, amber color, but, you know, not relevant semantics. But as far as I can tell, that seems to be the only noticeable differences between the book version and the movie version. Oh, and also, I was trying to find a spot to show you guys this. I have this book. I found it on eBay and got it for Christmas last year. It's literally just an illustrated book of the second movie. I can't read it, obviously, because, like most Arthur merchandise, it's in French, but I just got it for the illustrations, and there's some pretty cool illustrations of Arthur using the vines here. Pretty cool. But yeah, everyone, I think that's basically all there is to talk about when it comes to the vines. Just like the 10th moon, there was a little bit more to talk about than I thought, which is, you know, good. The only thing I've got left to say, really, is that obviously we're told that the vines are incredibly dangerous, and that a lot of the ancestors of the BOGO Metasalai actually died attempting it. But obviously, because we're only shown it in this scene, and it's not really referenced anywhere else apart from a bit later in the Revenge of Malthusar, which I'll mention in a second, we don't really know what happens when the vines go wrong. I mean, Arthur was a child. He was literally Oh yeah, I forgot that we don't actually really know how old he was in the Revenge of Malthazar, because that's one of the really bad inconsistencies. But he was supposed to be like 11 or 12, and he was able to survive without any permanent damage. And while it was seemingly very painful, again, I know that from personal experience, and I didn't even do it right, it didn't seem as though there was any point within the process that Arthur actually looked like he was in danger of dying. Okay, everyone, editing Prince here. I know it's a little bit of an awkward point to interject here, but after this point, I basically started doing an outro, and there were a few things that I kinda forgot to talk about. First of all, I mentioned earlier that the vines were actually brought up outside of their initial scene much later on in the Revenge of Malthazar. But basically, after Arthur has arrived at the Minimoy village safely, he's explaining to Sifrat and Miro and Bedamish and all the other Minimoys in the village why exactly he didn't end up there when the 10th moon happened. And he tells them that he used the vines, but he refers to it as the creeper technique. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that this is the only time in the movie where the term is used. During the initial scene with the vines, no one calls it the creeper technique, so Arthur shouldn't know to call it that. But that's just a little something I thought I should bring up. But speaking of that leads me into my second point. I feel like in these two videos I've been almost overly negative and critical about Arthur, and maybe given the impression to some of you that have never seen it before that it's like not a very good franchise. First of all, that is not what I think. Arthur was the first ever obscure franchise I ever covered on YouTube. I love so much about it, and it will always have a special place in my heart. And if you've never seen it before, it is a franchise worth checking out. And for those of you who have never seen the franchise before and are discovering it for the first time through my videos, I don't want you guys to get a negative impression of it, because you guys know me, calling out franchises on their bullshit isn't anything new with me. I do that for fucking everything. And to reinforce the point, the vines are actually one of my favorite parts of the Revenge of Malthazar, because I thought it was so cool that we got to see that there was another way to get to the Minimoy world that was almost like a forbidden method. To be honest, the Revenge of Malthazar will always hold a very special place in my heart. Many of you know why this is, but for those of you who don't, let me summarize real quick. Basically, the Revenge of Malthazar contained the most stuff that I hadn't seen, because for those of you who don't know, there are 3 movies in the Arthur franchise: Arthur and the Minimoys, Arthur and the Revenge of Malthazar, and Arthur and the War of Two Worlds. In the UK, the first movie had a lot of scenes cut from it, and it was called Arthur and the Invisibles, which is probably the name that most of you know it by. And the second and third movie were mashed together, with the Revenge of Malthazar having most of its scenes cut into one movie called Arthur and the Great Adventure. And basically, I didn't know any of this until 2018, which is what started my whole obsession with Arthur, and the Revenge of Malthazar has a special place in my heart because it contained so much stuff that I hadn't seen before, like the vines, all of the extended scenes between Arthur's family, and of course all of the character development done for Selenia and her relationship with Arthur. And you want to know the funniest thing about Arthur and the Great Adventure? Because they cut the vine scene out, they literally used footage from the first movie to show as if the light beam had actually activated, and then showed Arthur falling down the tube that he fell down after having used the vines into Max's bar. In the context of Arthur and the Great Adventure, it made literally no sense, because it genuinely looked like Arthur used the telescope successfully and then randomly ended up in Max's bar instead of in the Minimoy village. I am not making this shit up, that is genuinely how they did it in Arthur and the Great Adventure. Young me was very confused. So I'm just trying to make sure you guys know that I'm not trying to say that the franchise is bad just because it's got a few inconsistencies. I mean, none of the franchises I cover are perfect. Like, look at Dinosaur King, one of the biggest franchises I cover on this channel, and it has a complete and utter lack of anything resembling character development, despite it having 2 full seasons, and it has an entire episode that is literally one big gigantic plot hole that makes makes literally zero sense. And Max Steel ignoring seasons 4 and 5, at least Arthur had a good romance subplot, unlike Max Steel, which strung us along with Max and Sydney for 2 whole seasons and season 3 without doing literally anything with them. So yeah, just wanted to make that point, because I fucking love Arthur and I don't want anyone thinking otherwise. And finally, one more thing I wanted to mention, because it is relevant to the Vines. In the trailers for Arthur Malediction, which I reacted to a long time ago on my other channel and may even re-upload here, it seems as though within Arthur Malediction there is going to be a Vines seed. I still haven't watched Arthur Malediction, so no spoilers obviously, and I'm not exactly expecting much from it, but at the very least it'll have a bunch of Arthur references in it that I'll probably enjoy, and the Vines scene will definitely be one of them. So with all of that said, let's get back to the original footage and let's end off the video. So we don't really know what would happen if something did go wrong with the Vines, but the reason I'm bringing this up is that this was actually something that I was going to explore in my cancelled Arthur book, Arthur Returns, which I think I'm going to talk about in a big live stream where I talk about a bunch of Arthur stuff that I'm not really able to make videos on, including the actual context behind me using the Vines a couple of times, for those of you who don't know. So look out for that live stream possibly sometime in the next couple of weeks. And of course, make sure to go join the casual Discord if you don't want to miss any of my videos or live streams, as you'll be automatically notified whenever I upload or go live. And while I always put it out as a post on my community section, I always announce my weekly stream schedule in the Discord as well. And of course, if you're a fan of Arthur or you want to learn more about it and you want to hang out with other Arthur fans, go join the Seven Kingdoms Discord in the description down below as well. Oh, and don't forget to check out r/Minimoy if you haven't already on Reddit. I want to start building up the fandom of the Arthur franchise a little bit more again. So again, thanks a lot for watching, everyone. I really hope you guys did enjoy. I really hope you guys had a great 10th moon, whether you decided to just watch one of the movies to celebrate, or if you decided to raid an ancient Minimoy temple in search of a magical forge and almost get killed by a bunch of Indiana Jones style traps. You could have also done that. I'll hopefully be back soon restarting my review series of the Revenge of Mouthsar book, telling you guys everything that happens in it. And also for Halloween this year, I'm finally gonna be watching Arthur Malediction. It's finally time for the casual prince to watch the 4th Arthur movie. Kind of looking forward to it, not gonna lie. If nothing else, it'll definitely be an entertaining video. So everyone, thanks a lot for watching, and I will see you on another video or stream very, very soon. Goodbye, everyone.